係時間到咗啦，法定人數又夠啦。
All right, it's 9 o'clock and we've got a quorum already. So may I now call the hearing or the meeting to order. This is chapter 1 and the lead member for this chapter is Mr. Kenneth Leung. Before we start, can I ask members whether they've got any interest to declare? No? Then may I welcome Mr. Wong, the Secretary, Christine, Anissa, and their colleagues. Thank you for coming today so that we can have a chance to ask you questions on Chapter 1. We've got paper R59/1/Gen3. So I believe you've got a copy. So can I invite the secretary to say a few words first?
主席，早晨。首先好多謝委員會俾我。
Thank you. I would first like to thank the committee for giving me and my colleagues the opportunity to respond to the Audit Commission's reports on our air quality improvement work. I'm also appreciative of the effort of the colleagues of the Audit Commission and agree with the recommendations in the report. In fact, improving Hong Kong's air quality is one of the priority work areas of the administration, the new administration, and we've already formulated a basket of policies and measures to improve air quality. The government has endeavored to improve Hong Kong's air quality. Under the Air Pollution Control Ordinance, the EPD should implement appropriate measures to achieve the air quality objectives, which are statutory objectives for protecting public health. To better protect public health, the government announced in January this year the adoption of a set of new AQOs by making reference to the World Health Organization's air quality guidelines and interim targets. We are now in the final stage of drafting the enabling legislation, and we expect to table our legislative proposals to the LegCo for approval early next year. To ensure Hong Kong can parallel international best practices in air quality management, will include a provision to review the AQOs every 5 years in the bill for achieving the ultimate air quality guidelines of the WHO in the longer term. Hong Kong is suffering from two distinct air pollution problems, namely roadside and regional air pollution. We have been taking two different strategies to tackle these two air pollution problems to improve our air quality as soon as possible. On the one hand, we have been implementing stringent control measures on our local emission sources. And on the other hand, we are working closely with the Guangdong provincial government with an aim to reducing regional air pollution. From 1999 to 2011, our ambient air quality showed improvements. The concentration levels of key pollutants, SO2, NO2, RSP, and carbon monoxide were reduced by 28%, 7%, 8%, and 20% respectively. But due to the deterioration of the regional smog problem, the concentration of ozone, however, increased by 21%. And ozone is the major air pollutant not in compliance with the AQOs. In the same period, our roadside SO2 was reduced significantly by 56%. RSP, though still not in full compliance with the AQOs, was also reduced by 33%. Roadside NO2 increased by 23%. This has become our main challenge with regard to roadside air pollution. The causes of high NO2 and RSP are emissions from buses, old and poorly maintained diesel vehicles, LPG vehicles using worn-out catalytic reduction devices, and the deterioration of the regional smog problem. These accelerate the formation of NO2 from the nitric oxide emitted from diesel vehicles. Roadside air quality poses the greatest public health concern. So we are focusing our action on two major causes, namely aged buses and aged diesel vehicles. We have adopted new and effective improvement measures, including retrofitting Euro 2 and Euro 3 franchised buses with selective catalytic reduction devices which can effectively reduce their nitrogen oxides emissions, requiring the franchised bus companies to deploy low-emission buses as far as practicable to run routes in busy areas, launching a more stringent regime of emission control on petrol and LPG vehicles by using remote sensing devices and dynamometers from emission testing, and subsidizing owners of LPG taxis and public light buses to replace once the catalytic converters for their vehicles. In addition, to tackle pollution from diesel vehicles, apart from continuing the existing incentive scheme, we are also looking into new options comprising incentives and regulatory measures to strictly control and phase out aged diesel goods vehicles. In addition, we are stepping up control against emissions from power plants and marine vessels. For controlling emissions from power plants, we are very grateful to the LegCo for passing the third technical memorandum last month that would further tighten the emission caps on the two power companies from 2017 onwards. For emissions from vessels, we launched a 3-year incentive scheme in September this year to encourage ocean-going vessels to switch to low-sulfur fuel while at berth in Hong Kong. As for local vessels, we are working with the trade on a trial to ascertain the technical feasibility of using low-sulfur fuel for formulating a control program. Chairman, tackling air pollution tops our work on environmental protection. The CE has directed that the government should focus on public health in managing air quality. He also made it clear in his first address to the LegCo on the 17th of October that we will proactively improve air quality and carefully consider public health when formulating a clean air policy. Along this direction, the new administration has already reported to the LegCo our air quality management priorities: improving roadside air quality, reducing shipping emissions, and dealing with regional smog through local emissions reduction, as well as working with Guangdong to reduce regional emissions. On the regional front, we set with Guangdong last month the emission reduction targets for 2015 and 2020. We will attain the new emission reduction targets by implementing the 22 air quality improvement measures. According to our latest estimates, if both sides can achieve the 2020 emission reduction targets, our ambient SO2, NO2, RSP, and ozone concentrations will broadly achieve the new AQOs. Hong Kong and Guangdong will carry out an interim review in 2015 to review the progress in emission reduction and further ascertain the emission targets for 2020 in consideration of the state of socio-economic development. Through our efforts on the local and regional fronts, we expect that we will move progressively towards our long-term goals, namely the WHO air quality guidelines. To successfully implement our air quality improvement measures will require deployment of resources, support from the trade and community, and change of behavior of our citizens. At the same time, we need to take care of the need of low-income citizens and establish a carrot-and-stick policy. We will work closely with different government departments and other stakeholders outside the government to achieve the desired results. To strengthen the coordination of different government departments, the government has set up a new policy group under the Policy Committee with focus on sustainability and the environment and energy policy. Under the chairmanship of the CS4A, the policy group will strengthen cross-bureau and department cooperation in the formulation and implementation of air policies. To better understand the needs of the community and tackle more effectively and comprehensively our air pollution problem, we are also strengthening engagement with experts, academics, professionals, and green groups for formulating a better air quality strategy. In fact, we conducted 2 engagement sessions in October this year, and we will soon put forward a control plan which will detail our planned actions. Chairman, my colleagues and I are ready to listen to the views and suggestions of members, and we are willing to respond to the questions and comments of the committee. Thank you. Thank you very much, Secretary. Now, the Secretary's speech relates to chapters 1 and 2, in particular, para 6 to 10. But then, Kenneth, I think before you start, members can ask questions on the Secretary's speech this morning. I would like to ask a question first. Now, para 2 says that your longer-term objective is to achieve the air quality guidelines of the WHO. So we need to write a report. So can you tell us what you mean by in the longer term in para 2 of your speech? Yes, Chairman, thank you for your question. We are trying to upgrade our AQO step by step. The bill will be tabled in LegCo next year, and we hope that we'll be able to adopt the new AQOs in 2014. The AQOs will bring us nearer to the WHO's AQGs and interim targets. We've already undertaken to carry out a review after 5 years. According to the WHO's guidelines, the standards should be adjusted in accordance with the actual situation in a particular place. In fact, no place strictly adopts the AQGs as the blueprint. It really depends on the circumstances in that particular place. But then there will be a review after 5 years, so that we'll be able to, as far as possible, be near to the WHO's AQGs. Yes, perhaps my colleague can supplement. Christine. Yes, Chairman, I understand that your question is when we'll be able to get near to the WHO's AQGs. Now, I want to say that, in fact, here in Hong Kong, we're talking about Hong Kong as well as a large part of Guangdong. And if we look at the WHO's AQGs, they are mainly about the ambient air. And so we have to look at the entire ambient air region. If we want to achieve or get near to the WHO's guidelines, we need to have significant improvement in the entire ambient air region. So I would like to emphasize that in Hong Kong, our policy comprises two parts. This has been pointed out by the Secretary. The first part is about the situation in Hong Kong, what we can control. That's why we are focusing on tackling roadside air pollution and emissions from marine vessels. This is because, firstly, these are things that Hong Kong can control, and secondly, these are emissions which affect Hong Kong people's health most. And if we can make improvements in these areas, then Hong Kong people will be able to benefit on a daily basis. And then concerning the ambient air region, we need to work with Guangdong. And so apart from tackling roadside air pollution and emissions from marine vessels, we also need to step up cross-border cooperation. In fact, we have been working very closely with Guangdong in recent years. And I think I will leave the details to the hearing on another chapter. But then the Secretary mentioned the longer-term goal in Para 2 of his speech. And as we need to write our report, we need to know what you mean by the longer term. 5 years or 10 years or what? You said that there were 3 priorities: roadside air pollution, emissions from marine vessels, cooperation with Guangdong. So we want to know whether you have a timetable for achieving these longer-term goals, because we need to follow up on whether you can achieve these longer-term goals. It doesn't mean that our work will end after we've announced our report, because in his speech he mentioned the longer term goal, so we want to know when the longer term goal will be completed. If you don't have the information today, you can give us a timetable. Next time you can study the matter.
This timetable is the timetable that you'd like to attain. It's not that we would like to monitor you. Other colleagues, do you have any questions on the speaking notes? If not, we'll proceed to the questions on Chapter 1. Kenneth, you are the lead member, so you have 15 members. You can ask questions first. And then Ellen, the second. Kenneth, Ellen, and then Shan Hak-kan. Kam-sing. Kenneth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the Chairman said, today's hearing will focus on Chapter 1, Monitoring and Reporting of Air Quality. First of all, I'd like to thank members and the Bureau for attending this meeting. Now we can look at the timeline in discussing this matter. The air quality objectives are actually under Section 7 of the Air Pollution Control Ordinance, which was formulated in 1987. Well, on page 7 of this report is mentioned, and also in number 14 of 2005, it's mentioned that air pollution had been reported on by the EPD. So it's in 1997 and 2005. That is 29 and 24. In 1997, there was a review. On page 8 of the audit report, this is mentioned. After 1997, 10 more years on, the EPD commissioned a consultancy study which started in 2007. Upon the completion of the review, it's already July 2009. So that review took about 2 years. After the publication of the consultancy review report, the administration advised the LegCo that there would be new air quality objectives, AQO. Now this is mentioned very clearly in paragraph 1.9, that is page 5 of the report. And then it's clearly said that in 2014, the new AQOs would be adopted. So that's the timeline. From 1987 to now, 20-odd years have passed. Now, in 1987, the AQOs were formulated, and at that time, the WHO had its own set of AQOs. That's in 1987. In 2006, the WHO renewed the guidelines. In other jurisdictions like the UK and the EU, in 2007 and 2008 respectively, they have this PM 2.5, which got new AQOs. Again, this is mentioned very clearly in Chapter 1 of the audit report. Now, I have this question. We had the audit report. The EPD conducted at least 2 reviews. So why is it that in Hong Kong it took us 27 years to formulate a set of new AQOs? That's my first question. Secretary or Undersecretary? Andrew? Colleagues? Well, if you want to mention chapters 1 and chapter 2, then you have to tell us the paragraph number. Say, for example, paragraph 16. Concerning Mr. Leung's question, perhaps I should explain the process of our review on the AQOs. As the audit report points out, the existing AQOs of Hong Kong were actually set out in 1987 initially. And then we made reference to the US guidelines before formulating the existing set of AQOs. By 1997, we raised the issue that the AQOs had been in place for 10 years, so there should be a review. So in 1997, we set up a working group to examine whether or not or to which direction the AQOs should be reviewed. Some environmental concern groups and professionals advised us that if we could tighten the AQOs, it would be helpful in terms of public health. In 1998, the working group was set up. So our next step was to study how and to what extent the AQOs should be tightened. Later, we focused on how the AQOs should be tightened. PM 2.5, what ceiling should we set for it? And we continuously made reference to the practice overseas. For the United States, in about 2000, they tried to introduce a new AQO, that is to set a ceiling for PM 2.5. And there were some litigations. So we would like to gauge the development of those litigations. Litigations related to PM 2.5 in the US were completed in 2005. And then in 2006, the WHO published a new set of guidelines on PM 2.5. And that's a new reference for us. And then in 2006, the WHO published the new guidelines. So in 2007, we commissioned a consultancy to carry out a comprehensive AQO review for us. And then in 2009, after obtaining the consultancy report, we carried out a large-scale consultation exercise to consult the stakeholders on their views on the new AQOs. And in May, the EXCO said that we could adopt the new guidelines and formulate a new set of AQOs. And after completing the statutory procedures, we would like to launch the AQOs in 2004 or 2014. Well, you have not answered Mr. Leung's question of why it took us 27 years to do all these. Because in 1987, you set the AQOs, and then 1997, still, you had the AQOs in 1987, and even in 2007, you still adhered to the old 1987 AQOs. So you have to answer members' questions directly. So you have to answer his questions of why it took 27 years. Well, the main reason is when in 1997 we comprehensively triggered the whole process. For the first time, we had to do a lot of work. And then in the year 2000, we had to study the U.S. new guidelines. And then we discovered that the U.S. faced legal challenges and litigations. So we had to wait for the final outcome of the litigations before we made up our mind. Well, the litigations were dragged on for a few years and were completed only in 2005. In 2006, the WHO introduced new guidelines on air quality. So we had to study those new AQOs launched by the WHO in 2006 before we can conduct a review. So the review has been ongoing. It's just that in the process there were new developments, and the U.S. amended the PM 2.5 objectives and faced litigations. And then in 2006, the WHO introduced new guidelines, and we had to absorb all those. Mr. Leung, I also expected that the administration will cite 2.6a, paragraph 2.6a, to answer my question on why it took 27 years. Still, I'd like to ask a few more questions. First of all, under the AQOs, you have 7 pollutants, 7 of them. For the new PM 2.5, of course, you would consider whether or not you would add in the new guidelines. Now, in 1987, you had 7 pollutants, but you did not mention them and only told us something about PM 2.5. So why don't you look at the other pollutants as well? Why are you only telling me that for PM 2.5 there have been new objectives and guidelines? And what about the other pollutants? What about the 7 pollutants? That's in paragraph 1.7. We'll let them answer that question first. From 1987 to 1997, during those 10 years, in the United States, in the main, they're trying to introduce a new objective, that is PM 2.5. In 1997, we actually conducted a review. So in Hong Kong, we thought that we should also introduce PM 2.5. But then the consultancy report did not say what indicator we should have. So we had to wait till the U.S. litigations were over. So it's mainly because of the introduction of PM 2.5. And we had to wait for data from the PM 2.5 issue in the U.S. Did you inform the electrical or the panel the relevant panel in the LegCo. All these happenings, well, it took many years to go through all these, and from 1987 to 1997 was a long period of time. Well, I understand that you are actually concerned about PM 2.5, but what about the objective set for the 7 pollutants in 1987? Are you satisfied? Are you now telling us that you are satisfied with all the other 7 pollutants and you're only working on PM 2.5? Who will answer this? Mr. Pang, are you going to answer this? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In fact, before the 1997 review, the United States was our main reference. Before 1997, the U.S. did modify their standards. They modified the standard for PM 2.5. As for the other pollutants, basically they did not change their standards. So we hoped that in the 1997 review we could introduce the new PM 2.5 standard. As my 2 colleagues mentioned just now, there was a litigation in the United States, so we would like to clarify the U.S. standards first. Well, upon the completion of the litigation, the WHO came out with a new standard, which was more stringent than the U.S. standard. So we had to make reference to the WHO standard in formulating our own AQOs. Well, just now, Mr. Leung's question was very clear. In paragraph 2.26 of the report, you mention PM 2.5. And now he is asking you about the 7 pollutants in paragraph 1.7. You failed to answer his question. Can you answer that particular question first, Mr. Pang, Mr. MOK, or Mr. Lai? Mr. Leung's question was very clear. You should answer that. You have to answer each question first before we can proceed to the next section. Are you satisfied with the 7 pollutants? Satisfied or not? Because in chapter 2, or in audit report number 29, the same question was asked. Or the same issue was raised. Well, here something is mentioned about the overseas revision standards. Just now I said that as far as the U.S. is concerned, in 1997 they introduced a new standard. In 2006 they ratified the new standard. As for the other pollutants, their standards were not revised. Now in 1986 we set our standards with reference to the U.S. standards. So if there are no revisions in the U.S. for the other pollutants, we're of the view that they could be retained. So you follow closely the U.S. standards. You have not considered the situation of Hong Kong. Now, paragraph 1.7a to g, for those pollutants, you copied completely the standards of the U.S. In 1986, when the standards were set, 1987, oh yes, 1987. In 1987, we entirely followed the U.S. standards. A short follow-up. It doesn't matter. This question is very important. We have to establish this first before we proceed. I don't think the other colleagues will mind. Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that they're following closely U.S. standards for the 7 pollutants in paragraph 1.7. Now, the litigation in the U.S. was completed in 2005, and that litigation delayed your study. And in 2006, the WHO updated their standards. In other jurisdictions, like the UK, in 2007, they already launched new standards for PM 2.5. In paragraph 2.19a, paragraph 2.19a, it said that the UK and the EU set air quality standards for PM 2.5 in 2007 and 2008, respectively. They did it very quickly. In just a year or two, they completed everything. But then from 2005 to 2014, it would take us 9 years. So what were your difficulties? Well, the indicators are one thing, the standards are another. Well, I'm actually asking about the indicators. Mr. Lai, Mr. Mok, or Mr. Pang? Don't stand on ceremony. In 2006, the WHO published their objectives. And immediately we commissioned a consultancy to study how we should update our own AQOs. It's not just updating of the objectives. We had to find a method or some measures or strategies in order to attain the new objectives. It's precisely because of that that we and the consultancy needed more time to examine what measures could be adopted. Secondly, after adopting the measures, what objectives would be attainable in Hong Kong? Now, we have to satisfy the WHO objectives in 2006 that's mapped out in their guidelines. They didn't just mention figures. They set down principles. That is, for each jurisdiction, under what principles they should set their objectives. And one thing is that we had to work out the methods first. Otherwise, the citizens will always see that we could not attain the objectives if they are set too high. But if the objectives were set too low, it would not be sufficient to protect public health. So we had to study the WHO guidelines, our objective conditions, and our air quality. So we carried out a public consultation exercise in 2009. In the consultancy report, 19 air improvement measures were proposed. Some of them were not easy to carry out.
For instance, how do we phase out old vehicles? How can we reduce emissions from vessels? These are rather difficult questions. So we have to think of ways to implement these measures. And then after the public consultation, we have to further to upgrade our air quality. As some colleagues said, roadside air pollution was very serious, so we proposed measures to further enhance roadside air quality, and we have 22 measures in total. Thank you. So the EPD spends $500 to $600 million per year. Now, because we're looking at value for money audit, why has it taken you so many years to complete a report? And after that consultation, you are spending public money, and our health is also very important. Can you explain why it has taken the department so long before we can step forward a little bit? Undersecretary. Thank you. Thank you, members, for your questions. Director. Yes, we of course are concerned about protecting public health, and we also have to give reference to the latest information or recommendations internationally. Well, we have kept an eye on how WHO was preparing to amend its AQGs, and we've followed up on the principles outlined by WHO. WHO has a very clear policy guideline. Although a set of AQGs AQGs have been published. Well, they've got interim targets and final targets. Well, there are interim targets for some of the pollutants. There are different phases for the targets to be reached. For pollutants, there is no absolute value for safety. There is no absolute value as far as safety is concerned, and in real life, air pollutants cannot, or emission cannot be zero. So it's just an assessment of the health risks associated with different levels of air pollutants. So the values given by WHO reflects this. And WHO has said that when individual cities set their own standards, they can take into account a basket of considerations such as their social situation. So WHO hasn't mandated the adoption of the AQGs for all places. So far, no place has fully adopted WHO's guidelines as their statutory objectives. Although we know that WHO has issued its AQGs and interim targets for different pollutants, we have to have regard to the different circumstances of different places. And I will not repeat what has been explained by our colleagues. And have we been sitting idle in the past few years? That's not the case. To improve air quality so as to safeguard public health and protect our environment is our responsibility. So in para 2.15, we mentioned that in the past few years, while we have not fully achieved the AQOs, we have targeted at certain major pollutants that have been bothering us. So far, nitrogen dioxide, or rather sulfur dioxide, is a major pollutant, and its concentration has decreased substantially. And particulates, whether we talk about PM 2.5 or PM 10, they are related. We do keep a very close eye on the concentration of particulates and expendable particles. For instance, we have asked for the retrofitting of catalytic devices of diesel vehicles. So far, the concentration of RSP at our roadside has been decreasing year by year, and this can be reflected in our statistics. And we've also provided the data from our roadside monitoring stations. We have provided graphs. I believe they have been distributed to members. We do have them. As Christine said, well, the effect or the source doesn't just come from locally. It depends on the ambient atmosphere, and the weather or climate would also have an effect. We have many industrial operations surrounding Hong Kong, and regional. There is a very high regional emission of particulates from our neighboring places. For instance, take a look at one of our graphs. I don't know whether you have it. That's the concentration of RSP. Now, if you look at that green line of Tap Moon has no industrial operation at all. It's a very quiet place. We use the statistics of Tap Moon to show the ambient situation. Now, the blue line is very close to the blue line. That is the ambient concentration. So why is it like this? Because we've done a lot to reduce the amount of particulate emission. true, at roadside, the situation is not desirable. We have done a lot, but the extent of decrease is not enough. We will continue to work hard. So, Chairman, I'd just like to respond by saying that we have done a lot in the past, although there is still for improvement, but improvement has been made. We have already explained the situation in paragraph 2.15. Thank you, PS, for your reply. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Chairman, I'd like to make a general comment. I'm not saying that Hong Kong should copy everything from EU or WHO, because we do know that there are different considerations for different places. But I also know that some countries have moved faster, some slower. I'm talking about the pace. And not a question of whether the Bureau or the Department has done anything. Regarding the setting of AQOs, I'd like to give the floor to other members to follow up. I've spent almost 15 minutes. But the framework is we just look at AQ, the setting of AQ first before we move on to the question of complying with the AQOs. Mr. Alan Leung, the Deputy Director, Assistant Director, and Principal EPO have tried to answer our queries, but they failed to grasp the crux of the matter. Well, the objective consequence of air pollution in Hong Kong is every day there are deaths related to air pollution. And we've also got diseases associated with air pollution. And said by the director, of course, they've been doing that. But if you look at plans 5 and 6, the days where the API is over 100, well, the days per year have been increasing. I think for all audit, there is a starting point. All audit exercise, there is a starting point. Well, Cap 311, Section 7 says that the director shall establish AQOs. Section 8, the authority shall seek to meet the AQOs. Now, from 1987 to 2014, we have not updated our AQOs in a timely manner. To put it seriously, you have breached the relevant legislation because you have not discharged your duties under Sections 7 and 8. I hope the witnesses present appreciate the point. Mr. WONG Kam-sing and Ms. Christine LOH were not government officials during the period. However, we are now auditing the post itself. You may say that you are unlucky or it's just coincidental that you are in the two posts now. I hope the Secretary and Undersecretary understand that we are not really auditing your performance, but whether your Bureau has performed what is expected under Cap 311 in a value for money manner. This is a platform for the executive to discharge its constitutional duty under the Basic Law, and that is to be accountable to the legislature here. Mr. Kenneth Leung quoted from the introduction of the report. Number 29 audit report was done, and 2005 number 44. 2005 number 44. And this committee, PAC, also compiled report number 29 and 44. I have troubled the Secretariat to print out or to make available the conclusions and recommendations of that two very important reports. I believe the witnesses have got copies with them. It's been 15 or 16 years since 1997. Back then we expressed concern about the AQOs and also serious pollution there, and we gave recommendations as to how we could improve the situation. In report number 44 of 2005, our conclusion was, although about $1.2 billion have been spent on implementing the measures to reduce vehicle emissions outlined in the 1999 policy address, the air quality in Hong Kong has not improved, and we expressed grave dissatisfaction. And we also expressed serious disappointment that the annual averages of respirable suspended particulates, or RSPs, and nitrogen dioxide roadside levels still exceeded the maximum safe levels as laid down in the air quality objectives by 45% and 26% respectively in 2004, and the figures were increasing between 2002 and 2005. What is regrettable is, in 2005, we expressed grave dissatisfaction and serious disappointment. I'm afraid we will have to escalate our dissatisfaction in report number 59. Well, the concerns expressed in our previous report were not improved. There's been no improvement to air quality and no new AQOs, so there has not been any improvement at all in these 7 years. I don't really accept the explanation given by the Director and Environmental Protection Officer of the department. If you are still studying the matter, why do we have premature deaths associated with air pollution every day? Well, even though you are studying the issue every day, why is the roadside APIs going up and up every day? I must express my regret as a member of the PAC. Chairman, you know, in open hearings, we always give witnesses to change my preliminary observations and conclusions. So I will give the Director one more chance, or the Secretary one more chance. Do you think the Bureau has really discharged its duties under CAP 311? And has the Secretary discharged his duties and responsibilities as the authority under CAP 311? Secretary. Thank you. Mr. Leung. Well, you referred to report number 44. I would suggest I'll draw members to some objective figures. All right, report 44 talked about roadside air quality in terms of RSPs and nitrogen dioxide. The two figures were exceeded by 45% and 26% respectively in 2004. May I ask my colleague to update members on the latest figures so that you can gauge the progress? Secretary, can you answer Mr. Leung's questions put to you regarding sections 7 and 8 of CAP 311? Can you first answer that question before you give the floor to your colleagues? Because he asked his question very clearly. Secretary, do you want to repeat your question? Perhaps the Secretary has not caught your question. Thank you. My conclusion at this stage is Bureau has not discharged its responsibilities as put on the Secretary under Sections 7 and 8 of Cap 311. If the Secretary disagrees, please give reasons. Secretary, can you please answer this question first? We must have answers to members' questions. Under Secretary? I think the member asked a very valid question. How do we, as a new secretary and the secretary, see the problem? Well, we have checked the relevant documents and we've tried to understand the situation with colleagues. I think members have heard some of the replies given to you by civil servants. But there are facts which will be hard for us to explain to you today. Because a certain policy, because it depends on the priority placed on a certain policy by a certain term of government. This is beyond the direct control of civil servants. What you have heard this morning is what, as civil servants, they have done. I understand the question of Mr. Kenneth Leung and Mr. Alan Leung. I know you are not satisfied with the answers because what you have heard was just what they have done. And you are saying that whether these measures are effective is a separate thing. You are talking about the tightening of the AQOs. Why has it taken the government so long to revise the AQOs? It's difficult for the Secretary and myself to answer this question. If you want us to measure the policy priorities of our previous 2 terms of governments, indeed is difficult to answer. And Mr. Leung's question now is whether we feel that the Bureau has acted in accordance to the ordinance. Now, it's a hard question for me to answer because there are things we could not see. Can we talk about the future? In the future, do we agree with Mr. Alan Leung that the Bureau should act as required by the ordinance? This we agree. Now, it's difficult for us to tell about things of the past, but it's easier for us to talk about the future. So there may be a gap. And this is a question of how the new government, you don't want us to show the attitude that we don't want to comment on things.
Now, Under Secretary, I can understand what you are trying to say, but then this report is about what happened in the past. History is not just about the judgment passed today on what happened in the past. We need to know what happened in the past, why those things happened, and then we can look ahead. So we can't simply look ahead or look forward. We have to look at the past. We want to know what happened. We want to know the facts. So that's why we have read so many papers, because we want to know what happened in the past, why those things happened. And so concerning Mr. Leung's question about whether the government discharges duties under Cap 311, I understand it's a difficult question to answer, but still, I think you need to answer this question. Perhaps I can share my observation with members, Chairman. Maybe in the past, Hong Kong was rather passive with regard to the tightening of the objectives. A rather passive approach was adopted. Now, of course, Hong Kong was one of the major cities in the world. And if we look at how the US, how the EU adjust their indicators, I think, of course, Hong Kong had to observe what others did. Now, concerning the future, I think Hong Kong should also observe what's happening in the mainland, their pace of adjusting their objectives. In the mainland, they are promptly adjusting the objectives and indicators in areas where emissions are serious. So Hong Kong should really look at what it should do. And in Hong Kong, we should emphasize public health. This aspect should be emphasized in our policy. And that would mean that we can't simply talk about reducing emissions. We have to reduce emissions to such an extent that public health can be enhanced. In other words, Hong Kong should no longer adopt a passive approach in this matter. And maybe the previous terms of government were too passive in this regard. Alan. Chairman, I've already stated my position very clearly. Now, concerning these two new political appointees, the secretary and the undersecretary, I can understand why they are not defending the previous terms of government. But then I want to say that with regard to Section 7, Section 8 of the ordinance, they're saying that Hong Kong was too passive. Now, the health of Hong Kong people is deteriorating day by day, and some multinational companies are unwilling to set up their regional headquarters in Hong Kong because expatriates are not willing to come to work in Hong Kong because of the poor air quality here. When Donald Tsang faced accusations about poor air quality, lack of improvement, lack of progress, he showed disdain towards such remarks, and he looked rather complacent. So the previous terms of government, according to the new political appointees, were too passive, not proactive enough. Now, I do have expectations concerning the two new political appointees, but then we understand that when we prepare the report, we need to draw conclusions on what happened. But of course, I understand that we need to look ahead. We do appreciate and share the vision of the two political appointees, but I want to say that the political appointees did not defend the previous terms of government. So, and I think my line of questioning will end here for the time being. But then, may I refer back to para 2 of the speaking notes of the secretary. So in the longer term, you want to achieve the AQGs of the WHO. So we want your timetable. Yes, you're saying that we need to look ahead. Yes, we'll also look ahead with you. But then, before we can look ahead, we need to have the facts. Yes, both I and Mr. Leung agree that we should all look ahead. We support your work, but you have to give us a timetable. Are we talking about 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years? Chairman, I think we've already offered a reply, and that's in para 2 of the Secretary's speaking notes. Now, if we can adopt the new AQOs, then we should be able achieve those new targets by 2020. But then as to when we can achieve the ultimate AQGs of WHO is really difficult for me to give you a reply. If you ask the US government this question today, I don't think they can give you an answer. Now, assuming that starting from today, we have zero emission in Hong Kong, we'll still not be able to achieve the AQGs of the WHO. But then, Christine, I can understand what you've just said. But then you can't put forward an objective knowing that that objective cannot be met. So we are responsible for monitoring the administration. We are to make sure that you can deliver your promises. Yes, Mr. Lai. Yes, Chairman. I've got 2 points for Mr. Leung's information. First of all, the review for the air quality objectives. Like members, we are very concerned about the air pollution situation in Hong Kong and its impact on public health. We are all very concerned. But then, because of various reasons and constraints, it's true that these AQOs, new AQOs, have come rather late. But then, concerning the amendment bill, we will include a provision whereby there will be a review once every 5 years. So in other words, there will be regular reviews in the future. And as Mr. Leung has pointed out, there were 2 previous Director of Audit's report on air quality in Hong Kong. Of course, we attach great importance to the recommendations and observations of the Director of Audit. And may I refer to the graphs provided to members, page 3, page 4, SO2 RSP at roadside stations. The red line represents the concentration trends from 1999 to 2011. So for SO2 and RSP in the past decade or so, at roadside stations and at general stations, the concentration level was dropping. So in fact, there was improvement with regard to air quality. But then may I refer members now to pages 7 and 8. There are 2 air pollutants which the situation of which deteriorated. First of all, nitrogen oxide. In the first 10 years, it was a downward trend, but then the concentration rose in from 2009. And then nitrogen dioxide, the level was high at roadside monitoring stations. So with regard to roadside pollution, as the Permanent Secretary has explained, we've launched measures like LPG taxis and upgrading of the emission of certain new vehicles by June this year to Euro level 5, and we've also got other measures, but we fully understand and admit that for certain pollutants, we're not able to bring down the level, but then we've already identified the causes. For example, old diesel vehicles have caused a rise in RSP and nitrogen oxide. And so we've already put forward some proposals, and there are also some recommendations in Chapter 2 of report number 59, which we can follow up on. Mr. Gary Chen. Chairman, I've got 2 questions. First of all, the structure or the framework, and then I want to ask about certain objectives or indicators. Now, as the Secretary has pointed out, civil servants decide on their priorities based on government policies. Now we can see that Mr. Tong Chi-wah attached great importance to environmental protection. At the time, there was the Bureau for the Environment and Works, because he knew very well that many environmental problems were linked to transport. And then Mr. Donald Tsang set up a dedicated bureau to deal with environmental matters. And I can remember that the CS4A was once asked to coordinate an interdepartmental task force to implement measures to reduce air pollution. And that's in the para 2.9 of the report. But what has the Leung administration done to show his priority? Will there still be this interdepartmental mechanism headed by the CS4A, because the Housing and Transport Bureau, the Environment Bureau, the Development Bureau, and maybe even the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau are the relevant bureaus, because sometimes tax revenue may be affected. So is it that the Secretary for the Environment will have to fight the battle on his own? You may find your job more difficult because you are a new political appointee. So will there still be a mechanism headed by the CS4A to coordinate the work of different departments and bureaus to combat air pollution? All right, so the Secretary, please. Chairman, I thank Mr. Chan for his question. May I refer members to para 11 of my speaking notes. Now, of course, the Environment Bureau is responsible for combating air pollution. Other bureaus, including the Transport and Housing Bureau, also play an important part. And that's why I explained that the government has set up a new policy group under the policy committee with focus on sustainability, environment and energy policies. And the CS4A heads this policy group, and relevant directors of bureau will sit on this new policy group, including, for example, the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. I understand that cooperation and coordination among different bureaus and departments are required to combat the problem. So, Mr. Gary Chan, perhaps you were late and you missed the Secretary's speech. In fact, the Secretary already explained the arrangement in para 11 of his speech. Thank you, Chairman. I think it's important that there is this mechanism, because this mechanism reflects how much importance the government attaches to the problem. And then I understand that there was once a working group on the health effects of air pollution, and the working group comprised representatives from the Hospital Authority and the Department of Health. So can I ask you whether this working group still exists, this working group on the health effects of air pollution? Is this working group still meeting? Does the working group assess diseases and the premature deaths caused by air pollution, and are the assessment results reflected in the latest air quality objectives? Now, so is it on? So it's on chapter 1, all right? I think we need to really ask questions about this report. And in fact, we were on the 2014 objectives. Ms. Wong. I thank members. I thank the member for his question. There's no need to thank members for their questions. It's their responsibility to ask questions. But as chairman, I still have to thank the director of audit because in Appendix E there is a list of the major emission control measures introduced since 1997, and members can see that these measures try to tackle the main sources of emission. So this is to answer Mr. Alan Leung's question. Now our one of the major sources of pollution is the power plants, and that's why we have been tightening up the emission caps for power plants. But Permanent Secretary, can you answer Mr. Chan's question? It seems that you have deviated somewhat from the main course. Yes. So please answer his question, Permanent Secretary. Yes, Chairman. Mr. Chan asked whether the new air quality objectives were formulated with the input of the Department of Health, and the answer is yes. So, as Chairman, I asked whether the working group still existed, and does the working group still exist? What is it going to do in the future if it still exists? Chairman, thank you. The working group comprises or comprised representatives from the healthcare sector. The working group has completed its work. It has given its input. And I want to say that we will continue to have the input of the Food and Health Bureau in our future work. All right, Mr. Chen. I would now like to move on to the objectives from 1999 to 2011 for ozone and nitrogen dioxide. The objectives were not met, and concerning SO2 and RSP, in fact, in the past 25 years, we were never able to achieve the objectives. So is it really that difficult to achieve our air quality objectives? Or is it that, in fact, achieving such objectives amounts to a mission impossible? Or is it that our air quality is still not at its worst? It can only become worse and worse? In fact, there are a lot of things that can be done. I will not talk about the specific policies. Now, a basket of measures have been mentioned. So can we be told the difficulties in implementing those measures? I think the Secretary can deal with the policy perspective, and then the Director can tell us more about implementation. Yes, Chairman, thank you. In Hong Kong, the objective fact is that it's more difficult to tackle air pollution than people do in other countries because of our relationship with the Pearl River Delta region. So it's a big challenge, especially with regard to roadside air pollution.
有兩方面。
Anyway, we'll meet with the difficulties. Policy-wise, if you ask about ozone, it's actually a regional problem. Through our cooperation with the Guangdong province, we announced last month our objectives for 2015 and 2020. In the past, insofar as Hong Kong is concerned, we're able to meet the objectives. And on the mainland, they're able to meet the objectives to a certain extent. So this is a regional problem. But then Hong Kong has its own problems. For example, roadside pollution. The CE already said that he is concerned about roadside pollution in Hong Kong. We'd like to enhance the relevant measures so that our roadside pollution level can be satisfactory. Well, Alan, you asked about CAP 311 just now. Sorry, I have to go back to that. I think the responsibility rests with the Director of Environmental Protection and not the Bureau Director. In Section 7, it's stated very clearly that the Bureau Director is responsible. So is the statutory duty on the Director? Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. That's why we have to put on record these 2 points. That is, we have to separate 7 and 8. So sorry, because we must have to have accurate records. Under Secretary, we just now, Mr. Chan asked whether it's very difficult to attain the objectives. Yes, it's difficult to attain the objectives. Besides, if we do not attach importance to the subject, we'll never be able to attain the objectives. And if we are to attain the objectives, we have to do a lot of work. What does that mean? That is, different bureaus and departments have to cooperate with one another. So I believe it may be more relevant to follow up on this when we discuss Chapter 2. Mr. MOK. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to provide you with some supplementary information. If members are concerned about our past effort, then just now the Bureau Director already mentioned the regional problem, that is, to eliminate ozone. For the particulates mentioned by members, may I refer you to slide 4 of the PowerPoint presentation hard copy. I would like to raise a few points there. In 1999, if you read the upper red chart for the concentration of the particulates by the roadside, and then we have the middle line for general monitoring stations, and the bottom one is for Tat Mun. Tat Mun is a station far away from the urban areas to record the ambient level. Is to tell us the level of particulates. Now in 1999, note the red dot. For the roadside, the concentration is 90. For Tat Mun and general stations is around 40 to 50. So there was a difference of about 40 mg per cubic meter. And then by 2011, you can see that the red dot dropped from 90 to 60. For Tat Mun, it increased from about 43 to 50, almost 50. So, for roadside stations, Tat Mun station, or the general stations, why is it possible for the levels to drop tremendously? May I refer you to Annex E of the report? It's because the administration has done a great deal to reduce the number of particulates. For example, we enhance our control on the emission of smoke by vehicles. We raised our emission standards. We introduced LPG vehicles. We add emission reduction devices to old Euro models. All these had caused the level of particulates to decrease tremendously. Now look at 2011. It's very interesting. Look at the 2 dots. General stations, respiratory suspended particulates, and the RSP concentration at Tat Mun. You can see that they're actually very near to each other. Why? For the general stations, including the general stations in the urban areas, the RSP level was almost the same as that in Tat Mun. If we are to further greatly reduce the RSP concentration, then we have to act regionally. Of course, This slide also tells us that there is still room for further reduction for the roadside, for RSP concentration. Well, science and technology may further advance, and we may have newer models for our vehicles. But for Hong Kong, if you look at these figures, you'll see that we have to examine this issue regionally. So for RSPs, we spend a great deal of effort on them, and we see great results. And further down, we have to look at regional emission reduction and roadside measures. Well, Mr. MOK, we're not experts, you are. So please tell us whether or not you are satisfied with the Tet Moon and general figures, that is 40-odd. Well, a drop from 90 to 40, that's what you told us, but that's not too meaningful, because if 40 is still not acceptable, well, from what we heard, it seems that you have done a great deal of work, but that's not what the audit report is saying. So, first of all, you have to tell us whether 40 is good or not. We're duty-bound to tell outsiders the result. Mr. Chen, would you like to follow up on this? So you'll have a chance to further respond. Well, Mr. Chairman, slide 4 tells us that the figure had dropped from 90 to 40. That proves that they have done something. But if you look at page 13, table 2 or figure 2, you see that we're still very much below the major cities. If you look at figure 2, 19 for New York, 24 London, Sydney, 15, and Hong Kong 48. So, how are we going to further reduce the concentration? The Bureau Director told us that Hong Kong is very densely populated with a lot of high-rise buildings. But New York and London are also very crowded. Why is it that they have recorded such low figures and our figures are so high? Are you telling us that the situation is very bad in the Pearl River Delta? So, unavoidably, our figures will also be very poor. Mr. MOK. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps I should first answer a previous question. For RSP, is 40 or 50 satisfactory to members or myself? The WHO made it very clear that, of course, we would like the pollutant concentration to be as low as possible. However, the WHO also pointed out that when we say high or low, we have to resort to the ambient environment. So we cannot say whether or not 40 or 50 is good or not. From the point of value for money, in the past, we did adopt possible measures. Have we tried our very best to implement those measures before attaining such results? Why is it that I refer you to the details in Annex E, which carries the detailed measures? If you look at other jurisdictions, including the advanced jurisdictions, you see that, in fact, they might not have adopted such comprehensive measures as we had in Hong Kong. That does not mean that we're complacent. Mr. Chan said that other places also have a lot of vehicles and people. But you have to see that the development density of Hong Kong, when compared with other jurisdictions, is really very high. We have high-rise buildings and a lot of vehicles on our roads. The fact is, as I showed you in the slide, I'm not saying that 40 or 50 is reasonable. I just want to say that, as I explained to the panel, Why we always mention Moon? If you take away Hong Kong, there's no emission. We'll still face 40 or 50. We understand that we would like to further lower the figures. We also maintain that attitude in improving our air quality. So from the Bureau Director to our level, we have to reduce emission locally. Under science and technology and policies, we'll try our very best. But then we won't say that we're in the same region as the mainland, so we're not going to do anything. Just recently, we reached agreement with the mainland on the emission schemes for 2020. It's because we're working hard to improve our air quality. Thank you, Mr. Mok. We'll accord you a lot of opportunities to tell us the details. We appreciate the effort you spent in the past. And as reviewed in Annex E, just now the Undersecretary said that she could not represent the former SARG, but at least you can represent the SARG after the handover. At least this term of the SARG can make a big step forward. That's why just now I said that the Director of Environmental Protection has her own statutory status and the Bureau Director has his as well. So, Mr. Mok, when you prepare your report, you have to understand the background. You have to look at facts. Be it civil servants or any other parties, they have done a lot. It's not that the LegCo does not appreciate what civil servants have done. We are trying to be rational. As Mr. Leung said, we're not criticizing individual officers. We're talking about value for money, and we're commenting on government work. Undersecretary, well, I agree with Mr. Mok in principle. I'd like to share with members some other points. Now, this is related to our future policies. In the first report, 4 cities, New York, London, Sydney, and Hong Kong, are mentioned. New York, London, and Sydney do not have an industrial area in their vicinity. But for us, our industrial area is the PRD. When we look at the ambient environment, we have to look at the boundary between us and the mainland. Don't forget that even today, we have 50,000 plus factories or enterprises in the PRD. So very often when people compare us with New York, London, Sydney, and Paris, it's actually beyond comparison. We have to look at our own situation. Hong Kong people understand Hong Kong most. First of all, we ourselves should not try to draw such comparisons. Secondly, as Mr. Mok said, even in Tap Moon, it's 40. So it's not a matter of whether or not it's ideal. Even if there is no emission in the atmosphere, you still have that level of RSPs. That is, the ambient RSP level will still be the same. Mr. Tung Chee-wah did 2 very important things which still benefit us now. First of all, in 1999, with Guangdong province on the mainland, he reached an agreement to map out 10-year objectives. That was the first time Hong Kong had such cooperative plan with Guangdong. And just now we explained the situation in the past decade. In future, in 2015 and 2020, we also have new objectives. That's very important because this has laid a foundation for us to have cooperation with Guangdong to combat air pollution. And after doing some work by the roadside, obviously, there were improvements. Our taxis have changed from diesel to LPG. Well, the recent situation was not ideal, but in Tung Chee-wah's era, the situation was very good. If you look at the tables, you'll see, and charts, you'll see that after so much effort, there was improvement by the roadside. Christine, just now you said that we could not compare with any city because the situation differs from city to city. Now, just now you referred to New York, but in the vicinity of New York, there were 6 barrels with manufacturing factories. Same for London. So sorry, I'm not trying to debate with you. But in that regard, I have to say this, because when people read our report in future or when people watch the TV reports, we have to let them know the information. Many businessmen don't want to come to Hong Kong anymore. So we must compare with other cities. For example, we have to compare with Singapore. Our situation is special, but that does not mean that we cannot compare ourselves with others. The most important thing is to look ahead. If there are cities with good air quality, we should try to learn from them. So we should be more open. Secondly, you praised Mr. Tung Chee-wah, but in fact, Mr. Donald Tsang also did a lot. Just now, civil servants already said that the administration had done something. So each CE had done something. If Mr. Tsang did not carry out a review, you would not have this 2012 review. So fact is fact. Mr. Ng Leung Sing? Sorry, Chairman. I think I have to mention one more point. I'm not saying that we should not compare ourselves with other cities. You can do whatever comparison you want. But very often when people criticize Hong Kong, what are they doing? They say that we're a financial center. So why they choose London and New York? It's because they consider that these cities can serve as comparisons for Hong Kong. Now, we do not object to that. But then for ambient RSPs, we should not compare these standards or these cities. We have to explain to Hong Kong people why Hong Kong is like this. It's because behind us we have a huge industrial region. Well, just now Mr. Leung also said that because of the polluted air, he suffered from a cold. We have a population of 7 to 8 million people who need fresh air. The environment must be good, the air must be good. So that's the duty of the government. Ng Leung Sing?
Well, I mentioned section 7 and 8 twice. I like to say that under section 7, the Secretary is required to set AQOs. Second, to aim to achieve the AQOs, or the authority is tasked to aim to achieve the AQOs. And who is the authority? The Environmental Protection Department is the authority. And I also mentioned the Secretary in Section 8 because subsection 3 of Section 8 says that if the Secretary is of the view that he may act in any manner to achieve the AQOs, then he may issue a guidance or directive. And under Section 8.4, the authority must implement or execute the directive of the Secretary. So the Secretary is responsible under both sections 7 and 8. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your legal clarification, because they have not provided an answer in relation to section 7 and 8 yet, and we have to provide the answers in our report. So thank you, Ms. Anna Leung. Now, we've given them very clear explanation, and it is their decision whether to answer the questions or not. Mr. Leung Sheng, the debate just now was very meaningful, regardless of whether you're in this term or that term of government. There is continuity, and we should also learn from history. I don't think this is really shaking responsibility. Rather, we should continue the work of the previous government. Listening to the two witnesses, I have the feeling that civil servants and accountable officers work as a team. There should be no distinction between civil servants and accountable officers, and the effect or effectiveness of administration is considered in this audit report. All right, I'd like to mention para 2.32 recommendations from the audit and also response from the administration. Para 2.32 is to take account of new WHO guidelines and overseas practices. On the 21st of November, there's a letter from the administration to give us information related to Singapore, Shanghai, so on and so forth. And according to the Secretary, the statistics are limited in a way that we cannot draw direct comparisons among the cities. Well, that being the case, we are all financial centers, or we're all international cities, global cities. We want to see whether the environment or the quality of our environment is improved. Here it says, London has got only one station, one monitoring station. Still, it is a monitoring station. Do we have to explore with WHO or other departments to specify the number of monitoring stations before we can compare the statistics? Otherwise, we can never compare like with like, because you cannot compare apples with oranges. So these cities are required to set AQOs, and we have to tell which city has achieved AQOs, which city has done well, which hasn't. So how can we improve the situation to make it more reasonable? And para 2.33c, the EPD has committed to reviewing the AQOs at a frequency no less than once every 5 years, and this is in line with international practices. And subject to the approval of LegCo, the EPD will promulgate the new AQOs through the APCO Amendment Bill. Now, if the new AQOs become legislation that will demonstrate the government's commitment for continuous improvement in air quality standards. Well, even if the new AQOs are not enacted, will the government be less committed to continuous improvement in air quality standards? How critical is a legislative amendment? What provisions in the amendment bill? Will there be an award, or will there be any incentive or penalties in the amendment bill? Secretary, I will answer in the general, and I will invite my colleagues to supplement. We've worked very hard so that we can have new AQOs that are set with reference to WHO interim targets. So this is our target, and we do have a roadmap to achieve that target. We adopt a pragmatic approach. Meanwhile, we respect the views of the Audit Commission and other people. We draw comparisons with other cities. It's okay to compare with other cities, but to understand and to analyze such comparisons, we do need background information, because there are bound to be limits in each case, and sometimes direct comparisons cannot be drawn. Regarding para 2.33c, Hong Kong is a rather unique place. Our APCO is linked with our environmental impact assessment system, and other cities rarely go down this route. I think I'll invite my colleague to supplement. Secretary, regarding para 2.33c, now if the new AQOs are enacted, because currently the AQOs are much more lenient than the WHO AQGs. So what will be the standard of the new AQOs? 2.33c refers to the new AQO's legislative amendment that will be tabled to LegCo next year. We will make reference to WHO's AQGs and WHO interim targets. And 5 years afterwards, we'll further tighten. Speaker is off mic. The speaker is off mic. The speaker is off mic. Well, for the new AQOs of Hong Kong, we have made reference to WHO's recommendations. We will adopt the final targets, the highest targets of WHO in certain pollutants, such as nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide 10 minutes, and also carbon monoxide. We will adopt the highest guideline of WHO. And on the basis of our local circumstances, we will also have interim targets 1 and 2. PS, can you give us a paper to compare the 1987 AQOs and the 2014 AQOs? Because if you adopt a lower standard, it's easier to achieve the targets. And so that we will know how you are going to move forward when we write our report. Mr. Mlangsheng? All right, E here says that the ENB and the EPD will introduce more measures to address the air quality problem. Will that form part of the APCO amendment bill, or will they be just administrative measures? And when then can they be launched? And can you please tell us the expected effectiveness? Secretary, thank you. Here it says that the ENB and the EPD have accorded top priority to reduce vehicle emissions. They impact heavily on our roadside air pollution. So we adopt a multi-pronged approach. For instance, we've given examples here. Diesel commercial vehicles, we will use incentives to encourage the phasing out of this kind of vehicles. Well, experience tells us that the effect is not very obvious, and we have to enhance our program. A short follow-up. So you may use legislative provisions or administrative measures. Do you need extra resources to do that? For instance, you provided ex gratia allowance for phasing out of old vehicles. Will you need a lot more resources in order to carry out these measures? Secretary. Well, to improve local air quality, we need multi-measures, and there must be more resources, support from the community as well as the industry. Any more, Mr. Nong-Shing? If not, I pass on to Mr. Wong Yok-man. Thank you. Chairman. The Secretary and Undersecretary spent quite a lot of time to debate with us the policies now and in the previous terms of government and how we compare with other countries. That has made me more interested, because when I first read the report, I had the feeling that the EPD and EMB would be difficult to introduce measures on its own to improve our air quality. This is already a well-known fact, because other bureaus are involved. For instance, we have the Transport and Housing Bureau, the roadside emissions from vehicles. Does it have anything to do with the Bureau THB? Of course. Well, the air quality is not so good. We've got so many wall-like buildings. Whose responsibility is it? The Housing, the Development Bureau and the TH Bureau. So we fully appreciate the association. It's not that we have put all the blame or responsibility on the Bureau and the department. We have expectations for you, because you are all experts here, Ms. Christine in particular. You have gone from an NGO into the government, but please do not speak depending on where you sit. Recently, I attended a seminar, a talk by Madam Long Ying-tai. I preferred her remarks when she was a professor here. So you have moved forward from the NGO sector to the government, and let me tell you that I have to express my attitude. I don't want you to adjust your remarks according to where you sit. Now here we know we have the mainland as our hinterland. Now if we always rely on the mainland, it is very difficult for us to deal with the air quality. But for reduction of local emissions, there are a lot you can do, and the report tells you that you have done a poor job. It's true that you have just taken over, but you have to take over the whole legacy. You have to inherit everything from the previous government. You can't say that it's not your business, none of your business. Of course it is your business. When you read the report, you should look at it seriously and humbly. Now, usually your response is, you have done a lot already. Of course you have to do a lot, otherwise why should you be paid? The question is whether what you have done is effective. And also the new AQOs. Hong Kong is an advanced city, so we must compare ourselves with these cities. Should we should we compare it with developing countries? Well, our income per capita is over 35,000 US dollars. So we are not a poor and developing place. Well, since 1999, we can see the changes. Nicholas Ng, the ex-secretary for transport, and then Mrs. Yam Kwan Pui Ying, and then Dr. Sarah Liu, and then Mr. Michael Sun. There have been so many different secretaries responsible for the environment. My criticism for the administration is very simple. I think there has been neglect of duty on the part of the administration as far as environmental protection is concerned, and there have been many mistakes in policies. So you might want to respond to my previous questions or not. It's up to you. Now, I'd like to refer to the AQOs. They were first established in 1987, and for a long time there have been no amendment whatsoever. Please refer to para 2.2. And in January, the SL government, not C.Y. Leung's government, but the Zhang government, announced that there would be new AQOs in 2014. In other words, we are still using AQOs established or adopted 1987 or 25 years ago. All right, in 2006, WHO promulgated new AQGs, and then in 2009 there was a consultants review commissioned by the EPD. Well, has the EPD discussed this issue seriously in internal meetings? You may say that it is none of your business, but I think you are somehow related because you have to inherit everything, the policies and also the achievements and the measures of the previous government. This is a serious issue. Have you faced up to it seriously? Now, this is something to do with the AQOs. I have not digressed. No, you have not digressed. You're on the right track. Okay, Secretary.
Yes, Chairman, Mr. Wong. I agree that there should be more cooperation and coordination among bureaus. And then concerning the mainland, of course, there are opportunities offered. Now, please do not talk about opportunities offered by the mainland. It's a regional problem. The Pearl River Delta region. It's difficult to resolve this problem. But then let him finish his reply. But I don't want him to seize the opportunity to praise the mainland. All right, let him finish. He's talking about air quality. Now, in order to combat air pollution in Hong Kong, there are two things that need to be done, one of them being regional cooperation. Now, in fact, we in Guangdong have been working closely. We laid down targets, and last month we also announced targets for 2015 to 2020. Chairman, don't interrupt him. But I must interrupt him, Chairman. But I don't interrupt him. I really can't really chair the meeting. So please let him finish, and then I will ask you to ask follow-up questions. Yes, Secretary, please. Concerning the AQG, my colleague can supplement later. In January 2012, the administration decided to adopt a new set of AQOs. Now, legislation is required, so we need to have some transitional arrangements. But I understand that in the interim, works departments use the new AQOs as the basis for their environmental impact assessment work. So, in fact, we are adopting these in our public works projects in the interim. Mr. Wong Yok Man, is it that He did not answer your question. My question was very clear. Since 1987, the AQOs have never been revised. It was only in January this year that the SAR government announced that it would adopt a new set of AQOs. So in other words, we are still using AQOs formulated 25 years ago. This is really most alarming. So you've taken over the work. I think you need to know why the situation was like that in the past 2 decades. So or I want to know whether the Bureau or the EPD have looked into why that was the case. Or are you aware of the problem and the situation in the past 2 decades? They can't say they don't know. They can't say they're not aware of the problem. Mr. Wong. Yes, Chairman. I think the Director of Audit's report is a good opportunity for us to know about what happened in the past. Now, in fact, there were previous reports on air pollution, and we understand that the Bureau and the Department are the responsible parties. So please give a more focused reply to Mr. Wong's question. So we have shown our determination by preparing the legislation. The bill will be tabled in LegCo very soon, and in the bill, a mechanism is provided for, but will have a review every 5 years. But you still haven't answered Mr. Wong Yuk-man's question, and that is, why is it that we are still working in accordance with objectives laid down in 1987? Can you answer this question, or can your colleagues, Mr. MOK or Mr. Lai, who were responsible for environmental matters in the past, answer this question? Christine? I believe when the last term of government decided to adopt a new set of AQOs, they came to brief LegCo. So we're talking about tightening the standards. And then for new government projects, they need to comply with the new AQOs. And then we're going to table a bill in LegCo. And LegCo members will be able to scrutinize this bill, but then there will have to be some transitional arrangements and a transitional period, because some projects have already obtained their environmental permits, so there will have to be a transitional period. Have I answered the question? No, Christine. Now may I refer to para 2.33. In reply to the Director of Audit's questions, you did not explain why the situation was like that. So questions were put to you, and in 2.33 you said that you accepted all the recommendations, and then you made certain points, A to G, but then Wong Yuk-man would like to know what the administration has done since 1985. Because if there is still this question mark, then we can't write our report. So the question is, why the situation has remained the same since 1987? You are telling us that in future there will be a review once every 5 years. Now, I asked the permanent secretary how we compare, how we should compare the present situation with the situation in 1987. Please answer Mr. Wong Yuk-man's question, because there will be trouble for us if Mr. Wong Yuk-man feels unhappy, and he is unhappy with the reply. Yes, Chairman. on the 1st of January this year. So that was the last term of government. Yes, last term. We announced that we would adopt a new set of AQOs. In fact, we explained in the report that we introduced the present AQOs in 1987. There was an internal review in 1999. At that time, we made reference to the air quality objectives adopted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and there were other causes, and as a result, we did not update the objectives. But then I want to refer to para 2.25 PM2. What was it? 2.25? 2.26a. So you refer to the court case, PM2. But then Mr. Wong Yuk-man is talking about all the AQOs, not just one of them. So at the time, we were also waiting for the outcome of the litigation. And then at the time, WHO had also carried out a lot of studies on the impact of various air pollutants on health. That was a very sophisticated exercise. But then in 2006, WHO promulgated its guidelines. And then in 2007, we started our consultancy study. And we have come up with the new air quality objectives. And then concerning the difference between the existing objectives and the new objectives, may I refer you to Appendix A and Appendix B of the Director of Audit's report. Now, we did spend a lot of time working out the new objectives, but then it's a large-scale exercise, and we have had a comprehensive update on the various types of pollutants. We've made reference to the standards put forward by the WHO, because WHO in fact has promulgated both interim targets and ultimate targets. So we've got the consultancy study results. We've taken into account the situation in the region, and that's why we've proposed various standards for the various pollutants. Please refer to Appendix B, WHO interim target 1, target 2, target 3. And then I would also like to refer to Appendix E. Mr. MOK may wish to supplement. No, I think the Permanent Secretary should have answered my question right at the outset. I think the administration, the EPD, need to explain to the public the crux of the problem. I think my question is totally relevant. We are concerned about the objectives. I think this is the crux of the matter. We have the same objectives since 1987, and then in March 1997, the working group on the health effects of air pollution was set up. This is para 2.4, and the working group comprised representatives from the EPD, DFH, and Hospital Authority. Was it that the working group was accountable to the Bureau, the Environment Bureau? Did it submit its report to the Bureau, the CS4A, or the CE? If the answer is yes, if the working group did give you regular reports, then what were your conclusions? What were your responses? And what follow-up action did you take? Mr. MOK. In March 1997, the working group on the health effects of air pollution was set up. It was set up to look at the AQOs at the time, whether there was any a need for improvement, and the working group proposed that air quality would be improved and public health could be enhanced if the objectives were tightened up. And they also proposed the introduction of an objective for PM 2.5. But the working group did not put forward concrete proposals on how to revise the objectives. For example, they didn't provide the figures. They merely said that tightening the objectives would be desirable. So they said that PM 2.5, an objective for PM 2.5 should be introduced, but no standard or figure was recommended. In fact, for PM 2.5, we have been making reference to the USA objective, and or should I say, the working group recommended an objective for PM 2.5, and then at that time the US was advanced in this area, so we made reference to the US. But then the US had come up with an objective, and that objective was at that time challenged in court, and so we didn't immediately adopt the US objective. We waited for the outcome of the litigation to follow up on the recommendation of the working group to adopt an objective for PM 2.5. But after the court case in the US, the WHO came up with the latest guidelines, which were very comprehensive. And so we hired a consultant to carry out another review on the WHO guidelines and on practices in other places. But do you have further questions? Because I think we need to have a break. Now, I have many further questions. All right, so let's have a break, and we will resume at 11:25. And after Raymond has asked questions, Kenneth and Ellen, also Paul after Raymond Wong, and then Kenneth, and then Ellen. So let's return at 11:25. 11:25.